Thanks, Tracy. So Analytics 8 is a data and analytics consultancy, and we believe that data and analytics are critical to an organization's success. And when COVID hit, we started talking to our clients and our partners around the world about what has changed, and what business priorities now, and how analytics can support those priorities now that everything has changed. We did a quick survey ahead of this webinar. I wonder if we're going to put up the results of that. But I know one of the results was that the top answer was that folks, we're looking to develop more insightful analytics. I think the second thing was folks were interested in how to update their data strategy. So if we get that may come up. I know that was something we had talked about. But in our discussions with our clients, we kept coming back to the same 3 or 4 specific types of analytics that our clients were pursuing or looking at pursuing to get ahead of the coming recession and the impacts of COVID. So the first one was customers and customer analytics. So you've got to understand you're changing customer behavior to sell more products and services and to keep your customers happy and with the appropriate levels of service. The second one is supply chain. So many of our clients deal with physical goods, and whether they manufacture them, distribute them, or sell them, their supply chains have been really upended as a result of the pandemic. And understanding these changes are really critical to business resilience and agility. The third one was HR and people analytics. So your people touch every aspect of your business, and the way they work has changed, not just in the short term, but forever. And understanding your workforce is one of the keys to surviving business disruption and uncertainty. The fourth topic, which we're not going to cover here, but I did want to mention it briefly, is financial analytics and specifically cash flow analytics. So we're not going to cover that here, but if you want to know more about that, you can check on our website or reach out to us and we can cover that topic in more depth. Because we've got 3 experts here from Analytics 8 to talk about 3 of the topics. So let me go ahead and introduce them now. So we've got Abram. Abram is a senior consultant with Analytics 8. He's worked with dozens of clients over the years, but his most recent experience is really relevant today. So he spent the last 18 months leading the analytics efforts at Anheuser-Busch or Anheuser-Busch ABI InBev to create their operational playbook for managing their wholly owned distributors in North America. So huge supply chain operation here in North America. We've also got Josh Goldner. Josh, say hi. Josh is a managing consultant with Analytics 8. He's built and implemented large-scale customer or constituent-based focused analytics for many companies, including Batteries Plus Bulbs, Duluth Trading, Crow Wing County, Minnesota, City of St. Paul, also Minnesota, Educause, and many others. So happy to have Josh participating. And then Tony Gallagher. He's a principal consultant with Analytics 8, and he is a lead architect currently for several global HR analytics projects that measure success for the entire employee lifecycle. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk with these 3 experts from within our own ranks. So I guess we'll just get right started, and just we'll start out with Josh quickly. Can you just tell us briefly what is customer analytics? Is it sales analytics? What all goes into it?
Sure. So customer analytics really is about understanding your customers and their buying habits. So not just really knowing their email, their zip, but really trying to understand why, when, and how they're purchasing from or interacting with your organization. So being able to understand all this allows for a lot more targeted marketing, agility in the marketplace, and overall better customer engagement because you're able to tailor the experience to be as personal as possible.
Okay, it's a good definition. With Abram, and tell us about supply chain analytics.
Sure. So supply chain analytics is built around the physical movement of goods from where it is produced to a retail or depot location, where it'll finally become available to the end consumer. And fundamentally, this involves dissipation of that inventory from a highly centralized production point to localized distribution. So I'll be speaking mostly in the context of between manufacturing and how it gets out to market, not upstream of manufacturing. Ideally, this process will end with a narrow lead time of the product arriving there ahead of it being sold, and the name of the game here is always going to be efficiency, expending the least amount of time and resources to achieve the task. This being the case, the recurring theme in the logistics that you'll always see is end-to-end visibility, and you have to have your analytics in order to make this as cost-effective as possible. It's a highly data-driven process.
What about service levels, not just cost and efficiency, but service to your clients? Does that come into it too?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to maintain your service level because any kind of logistics mistakes that you make are going to impact your customers, especially right now. It's going to undermine their efforts. So you have to stay on top of, your out of stocks or sending out expired product, and that a lot of those challenges are downstream of the kind of the primary issue that we're seeing right now, which is going to be your loss of forecast. Your forecasts are no longer accurate, so you can't plan and react to that.
Okay. And Tony, what's HR? You call it HR or people analytics, and what is it?
Yeah, we hear both out in the field. So people analytics really comes down to how you recruit quality talent, how you retain them within your organization, and how you reward them over time. And again, that all plays together in terms of retention as well. But it also looks at how you plan for growth and how to properly scale your organization with talent. It looks at how to justify investments in developing folks within your organization and developing their skills so that they have opportunities to grow within the same organization. And also we see a lot of data-driven initiatives right now around how to build a diverse and inclusive workforce as well with equal employment opportunities.
Okay. Why don't you tell us, Tony, about some of the challenges that we're seeing with customers? I'm sorry, with HR, with employees around that have been sparked by COVID, and what does analytics have anything to do with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've seen a lot of movement in terms of trying to assess the risk of the employees within the organization when it comes to a data-driven approach for that. So you're trying to figure out quickly where folks are at, trying to classify positions in terms of whether or not folks need to go into the office or not. Some organizations are trying to scale up because they've had a lot of growth and a lot of opportunities increase from the crisis because they're in a specific industry. Other companies are trying to figure out how they can keep the employees they have now and try to kind of huddle together and make it through this wave of disruption. So having a lot of challenge around figuring out where your folks are at, especially in big organizations, you'd be really surprised at how hard that is to do at a big organization, figure out how many people actually work for the organization, where they're at, and then classifying their positions in terms of risk. The other thing that's challenging is figuring out for those key positions, who can step into those roles from a succession planning perspective if somebody does go down for a period of time, either because they're sick or their family's sick and need to take care of people. And so there's a lot of different challenges that come up from a people analytics perspective, because like you said earlier, right, people are at the center of everybody's business. And now we see, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, that there's a lot of disruption when your people are impacted by something like this, where they're forced to change their lifestyles. And really, organizations need to adapt to try to help figure out what the new normal is going forward and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, I know even from an Analytics 8 perspective, with our handful of offices, it's a challenge thinking about back to work, right? I can imagine, I know some of the big clients you work with, some of the global, energy companies, for example, you're working with. It's got to be an amazing challenge. Let's check with Abram. What are some of the challenges? I mean, supply chains have been disrupted. Can you be a little bit more specific about, maybe what's going on at ABI, or what you're hearing about what's going on with our other customers or in the industry around challenges as a result of COVID?
Sure. So the bulk of kind of the very more emergency type issues are going to be centered around your inventory management. So your forward-looking metrics, where you need to know when you're going to run out of product in certain places, and you're trying to figure out how much more to send to your depots. But if you can't fundamentally answer that question of what quantities of which SKUs are going to be ordered next week, how can you possibly make sure there's enough inventory at the warehouse? How can you plan to have the right resources available? Because you're matching what would have been your forecast with a level of effort on your side from equipment and trucks and people to move that inventory. So when you lose that accurate picture of time and demand, your inventory management suddenly becomes very challenging. Do you truly understand how much inventory is even on your warehouse floor right now? Do you know what is out of stock today, right this second? Are you able to track your first in, first out still? There's still a lot of channel disruption. This will be more specific to say that the beverage industry, but when on-premise sales go away, so March Madness ends, arenas aren't open, bars and restaurants are closed. Those are big channels that are no longer available for you to sell. But then on the other side of that, those critical channels such as grocery might get a boost because now people are getting their product there. So one outlet closing might open another door a little bit, but the repercussions of that channel disruption then go further into your product mix. For instance, draft beer, keg sales, products like that are really only done in open venues where you go enjoy dinner or something like that. You're not going to Walmart and buying a keg. So once those channels go away, the outlet to sell those SKUs is gone, and they essentially become obsolete SKUs to a certain extent. The extreme example is going to be in microbrew, where a lot of them, if they can't can and bottle that beer and send it through an alternative channel other than at their bar counter, then they're dead in the water.
That sounds like there's a lot of overlap with customers, right? Because you're talking about different customer behavior, right? If they're not in arenas, maybe they're buying more at Walmart and Sam's Club and stuff. So, let's go with Josh and ask him what are some of the challenges around customers and customer analytics as a result of COVID. I mean, obviously customer behavior has changed, but can you get a little bit more specific than
that? Sure. Yeah, I don't think many of us have to look very far to really see how COVID's kind of upended how customers are purchasing or interacting with businesses. Obviously, being able to legally or not legally enter into many different locations or in a limited capacity in some way has posed a huge challenge. But even deeper than that, consumers not knowing when things are going to be in stock or if they're out of stock encourages a lot of panic buying, encourages a lot of hoarding. So to Abram's point too, nobody knows exactly what they need and when to do it. So all of the data that you have historically that kind of shows what we should be preparing for from a stock or from a sales perspective, all of those plans are kind of out the window just because everything's upended. So it's a huge challenge to figure out what do my consumers need, but what are they going to then need as well on top of that. So additionally, a lot of us are working from home, so we're shopping at completely different stores, right? Usually you might stop at a grocery store on the way home from work. Maybe that's not the case as well. So overall, just trying to plan for what your customers are needing. But then also one of the biggest challenges then is having all this data, but not knowing really what to do with it. Being able to integrate all that data into one place that makes it so that you're providing context to some of the numbers. They're just either don't have enough data or they don't have a meaningful way to actually sift through it.
I think we're going to get into it later, but you mentioned a point there about the forecasting, kind of being thrown out the window, right? You got to look at forecasts a different way. And I know in our prior discussions that we've had that's the case across all three of the areas. So that's probably one of the key takeaways is shorter forecasting windows and different, looking at that through the lens of, hey, things are different now. Let me check back with Tony and just ask a basic question. Where's the data coming from? If you're going to do HR analytics, where are you going to get your data from?
That's a really good question. So a lot of companies store their data in an HRIS system. They're tracking basic information about employees, just literally for payroll purposes. Some companies are a little more mature in that. They're tracking things through an applicant tracking system or maybe a learning management system. But it really depends on the size of the organization, what the maturity of that looks like. And the big thing that I kind of want to encourage people with, especially with people analytics, is you don't have to have the full picture necessarily to be able to do things and be effective in that. So Josh talked about centralizing your data. A lot of that is companies just literally bringing their HR data closer to the actual business data around their customers and around their supply chain analytics to help support those folks in the business. You talk about like Abram trying to figure out scaling up inventories and not. You need to do the same thing for workforce planning and figuring out how much overtime folks are needed to take on and what are the risks associated with certain people coming in the office for that. So for people analytics, what I would say, especially if you're an HR director, is don't be afraid to start to do the political work of going out and democratizing HR data in a governed and a secured way, and just trying to start small and trying to figure out how you support other parts of the business with the HR data and getting out in the organization, and also asking for that context coming in as well. You need data about employee sentiment right now because you change the way that they're working. You need to understand what their emotional health is like. You need to understand what their productivity looks like. And a lot of that takes that centralization that you're talking about in terms of bringing data together from other parts of the business and harmonizing that with your people analytics data. And it takes a lot of political capital to do that because HR data generally is behind closed doors because it's considered sensitive. But there are ways to be able to make it available to people at the right time for the right audience to make that important decision that they need to make.
I was as you were talking, I had some follow-up questions, but you covered them as you kept going. So, where's the data coming from for movement of goods, Abram, for supply chain? Where's that? Is that standard?
Not really. It can. There's such a breadth of it. So it could be from in ERP, inventory accounting, route execution. You might have devices on your trucks that feed you data, payroll, financials, safety incidents, orders, fleet management, even IoT devices, say thermometers and other sensors. So there's so much technology nowadays that companies can throw at their warehouse or their delivery, that it's a really broad spectrum. It's not very standardized, and it's updating and changing rather frequently.
So it's like companies mostly have the data they would need to look at their supply chain. Maybe they need to look at their vendors and their suppliers as well. And obviously for forecasting, I need to look at if they're in the middle, their customers and their customers' customers, right? Is that something that you've seen?
I haven't seen a ton of looking downstream too far into specifically for supply chain, as far as informing the immediate decisions of operations. It's very narrowly focused. You're focusing on just those bits of information that allow somebody to make a decision right there and mechanically do their job. So I haven't seen it to where we're really dipping into the end customer themselves. Josh might be able to speak more to that. But yeah, it's relatively focused.
It does seem like it could be an opportunity in some places, because I know, in my research and talking to folks, really understanding the consumer, when are they going to buy, how, in whatever industry you're in, that's going to kind of predict when things are going to get back to normal or get back to a new normal or whatever. So
yeah,
there's a lot of overlap.
There's kind of the things that opportunities that I've seen along those lines are hey, if your forecasts don't work, instead what you ought to try to do is collaborate with your sales team and be proactive in your service level. It'll do a couple things for you. So for instance, if you can set up with your sales team to get more lead time on your orders, so that once the order is placed, you don't need to do the fulfillment for 48 hours. This buys you time to do certain things. You can start with analyzing just that finalized order data. That's a perfect number. That's something that, in the absence of a forecast, now you can refine your resource planning based around that number, but it also buys you some interesting opportunities as well, to vet those orders before, if something's going wrong, before it's actually going to impact the customer. So you can flag duplicate orders and throw them out, identify those out of stocks, or there's even an opportunity to improve automated picking if you have machinery, so you can round up orders to a full layer or a full pallet. So if you can find those types of orders, have sales call the account back and say like, hey, let's round this up and we'll do a full pallet. And if you can do that, then you're doing it with machinery. You're gonna have fewer mispicks, less damaged product. All these things are gonna benefit your customer relationship, and it saves you money on the logistics side. Like, you need very timely data in order to do this, because it's very, very quick turnaround.
You gotta be measuring all that stuff. Like, you got to be measuring, your damaged goods and shipment mistakes and all kinds of things, right? You've all got to be on top of it in as close to real time as possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, timeliness is absolutely everything there. You're reacting to data or information that's a day or a couple hours old. So if you have to instead combine, pull 4 different reports and manually put them together with your VLOOKUPs and whatnot, it's by the time you finish that, it's too late. It's not as actionable.
Yeah. So I know from a customer perspective, I can speak for Analytics 8 perspective. We got our customer information in Salesforce, our CRM system, and we've got some customer information, in our financial system and things like that. So, at some of the large, mid-sized, organizations that you work with, Josh, where's the data coming from, when you're trying to understand your customers?
Sure. So, luckily, a lot of organizations have a lot of the data that they need. A lot of times they don't even know some of the data that they have, just because it's all kind of dispersed throughout the organization. So all of your sales data that you mentioned, your CRM data that you were just talking about as well, anything that you have at your disposal can be really used to help facilitate customer analytics. But the challenge, even pre COVID and everything else that's going on, is just integrating it in a meaningful way, making sure everything talks about to one another in a clean, concise way. But then also too, trying to make sure that, to Tony's point, all of the data is getting in the relevant hands as well. So I might be tasked with making decisions, but I don't know that there's data in this part of the organization or vice versa. So trying to get all that data into one place and really taking stock of it. But again, a lot of times, a lot of the data you need to do it is already present within your organization, but externally as well. So going back to talking to Abram, trying to figure out when and where customers might need certain products. That's the difficult part, because a lot of times there is a disconnect in communication there. So stores don't know when they're going to be getting a shipment, so they can't communicate that then to a customer. Hey, we're out of stock until Tuesday. So whenever the customer sees that it's in stock, they don't know they're going to get a chance to get it again. They panic and hoard everything that they can. But if there was some communication or some data being passed along, they might be able to help rebuild some of those plans and rebuild some of those traditional kind of customer metrics to know you can buy it at this time, don't worry about it, we'll have a steady stream along the way.
One question, so we talked about where's the data coming from. We talked a lot about sources that organizations already have. What about external data? I'll just open that up. Where, what other kind of data is easiest to get access to, the most valuable, that maybe is not, sitting in a system already?
For HR data, we certainly saw with COVID-19 data, there's sites that aggregate that at different organizational levels, and we had our customers also want to look in particular locales where their employees were to understand the risks. That's a good opportunity for external data. Also for HR, to be looking at demographic data as well and understanding for particular offices, are you representative of the racial and ethnic diversity in your community as well, and understanding that when you recover from the recession, you want to make sure you're recovering in an equitable way. And external data sources are a great opportunity for that.
Anybody else?
In addition to that, looking at weather data, perhaps to kind of pit sales in different regions. Why is there an increase or decrease? Maybe there's a big tropical storm or something. and also, especially with the upcoming weeks and months, looking at maybe some state and local, governmental data, figuring out which counties, which cities are opening up or allowing certain businesses to have patrons come in, or whatever the case may be. But anything that you can get externally to help provide internal context to your internal data.
One thing that I was thinking about, we've done internally from an HR perspective, we could certainly do it for our customers too, is surveys. Just ask. We did a survey. I know all you, the three of you participated. About your opinions on getting back to the office. I think that's probably a fairly straightforward way to get some good data. Although the timeliness of that probably it doesn't last forever. Right? You're going to need to do that regularly, or at least understand if you did a survey a year ago, it doesn't apply anymore.
Well, it's important. I mean, if there's with things changing so quickly, like for accounts, if you can't derive from the data what kind of the nuanced changes are affecting your customers on certain customers' accounts, you have to survey them. Like there's, simply put, there's no other way to ask them, and it opens up that line of communication. You might find out some interesting things like, hey, this area is highly impacted by curfews or protests, and say like they don't have people there any longer during their scheduled time window in order to receive delivery. Their resourcing might change, or the schools are closed, so their staff are now at home supervising kids instead of being able to keep a normal shift. So being able to get that information out of your customers that might not necessarily otherwise be available, surveying is a great way to do it. It's not like implementing a CRM. You can spin up a survey and distribute it for very cheap and very quickly.
I've got a question from one of our attendees here. I thought I would ask. I'll try to quote it here. So they see the biggest challenge is what consumer behaviors will change versus what will revert back to normal. And what are your thoughts on the importance of flex forecasting and supply planning? And I guess that would mostly apply to Abram or Josh. But if Tony, you want to speak up? Any thoughts on that?
It's very difficult to understand right now what's going to open up, how people are going to change their behavior in the long term. I'll just kind of answer with this stream of thought as far as like you can monitor that in your data with your data scientist isn't going to be able to figure it out. It's just not really predictable at this point. But you can understand what's happening now with very short look back periods for your products and your SKUs in certain geographies. So the faster things are changing, use like a 1 day and a 3 day look back in tandem, and it can give you the trajectory. It's not just the momentum, but the acceleration or deceleration. So you can use kind of sequential look back periods to look at and understand the rate at which certain areas are reopening compared to other areas. And so you don't have to rely on your legal team to call counties and say, hey, are you open now? I don't know if that answers it, but that's just what came to mind at the moment.
I've got a thought in that, we don't know exactly, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen next. We can do our best to predict it, but one of the things we can do as data and analytics professionals is provide the best infrastructure for our organizations to make quick decisions. So that if you don't know what's going to happen, you have the data, you have the infrastructure to ask those questions and get answers very quickly. I've got examples, but I don't want to get too far down the line into some specific things about how you need to make decisions very quickly. I think it's pretty obvious, but I think having that infrastructure in place so that you can make decisions quickly and be agile as a business and answer those questions that the business leaders need, and any decision maker, not just the leaders. Everybody's making a decision so they can do that. I think that's a key.
Yeah.
Let me.
Well, real quick to add to that, to answer what will be the return to normal, also kind of leads, what was it, right? So being able to look historically to see what is, or what should we be at, or where should we be at right now, Because if we can't answer that question, then we don't even know, I guess, what normal would look like if we don't know what we feel it should look like as well. But you know, being able to quickly, like Abram and David had said, being able to quickly ask some of those questions and at least get some context around there is going to allow you to, you know, do some customer segmentation. And I know we'll talk about that in a little bit as well, but you know, look at some of those things that you've already previously put in place from an analysis perspective around your customer to figure out, are there some flash in the pan things that happen? You know, are people going to continue to buy in bulk toilet paper, or, you know, or something like that? Or is it really just going to be, you know, that was just because there was a temporary disruption, so we can expect things to really kind of level out from there on in. But you know, to everybody's point, again, having that ability to ask where we were, where we should be, allows you to kind of figure out then, you know, where do we go from there.
All right. So how do we get a handle on these data sources? How do we actually get started? You know, what do you do to kind of get a system put in place? You know, and maybe you have something already, but what's the fastest way to get started?
Sure. So I think you know, the biggest thing to keep in mind is you don't have to do everything all at once. So start small. You don't have to boil the ocean. You know, having a good data strategy, having a good path forward. A lot of times that requires, you know, leadership kind of dictating down, you know, these are what we need to focus on. These are the KPIs we need to focus on. You know, pre-COVID, pre-everything, we might have had a bunch of initiatives that we were working on. Maybe we need to just kind of shift our focus to these things, or to Tony's point earlier, you know, business is booming. We maybe need to add KPIs to it to help focus on some of that stuff. But identifying and sticking to a strategy, starting small, gathering the data, integrating it, and then building upon it from there. You don't have to have a perfect plan either. You can very rapidly kind of throw stuff out there, see if it sticks, and then kind of build off of that as well. But anything at this point is better than nothing.
Yep.
Okay. Anything? What do you think, Tony? Abram? Did Josh say it all?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of echoes some of his points. If you're starting from scratch, we do like if you can find them, high value use cases that touch as many people as possible. The reason being is that, say, if you have an analysis that's conducted by an analyst at each of your 30 warehouses, and it takes 10 hours for each of them a week, you know, it's a lot of manpower time. And if you can automate that, make it accurate and good, and so they can rely upon it, you get that buy-in from the business on being able to use the program that you have going forward, and it takes away those manual tasks and repetitions. So in the early stages, we find things such as this more impactful than a flashy interactive app, and that's just the reality of kind of what I've experienced there.
That happens across a lot of industries. And what do you really need? And it's oftentimes it's a chunk of numbers and not flashy graphs. Those sometimes come later, even though that's not everybody is saying that. It's been my experience a lot of times. I want to ask Tony, in HR, are there some standardized, like, repeatable methods that companies can follow to get started deploying their HR analytics solutions?
Yeah, for sure. And there's certainly a lot of shortcuts out there that you can take to run at it from a departmental approach. A lot of providers sell solutions that come canned for that. There's certainly some value in that, but what I would encourage HR folks to do in terms of a methodology of data and analytics is to not alienate themselves from other parts of the business with whatever approach they do pick. So we're talking about moving fast. We're talking about prototyping and doing the things we need to do to figure out what's actually going to be valuable. But at the same time, like I said, you need to be building those relationships across the organization then as well to be able to get access to other data to actually provide context for those key HR metrics. And that's really what helps unlock, like, why is your attrition out of whack, or why aren't people engaged in this part of the business? And making sure that you're actually paying people for their performance as well, and rewarding those that you want to stay in your organization, your high performers. But certainly there is value in modeling the data correctly. And a lot of times that means going back to your central organization of IT or your data governance teams and making sure that you're following those best practices. That way, when it comes time to share the data out, you have structure and scalability in place to do that securely and quickly then as well. And it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of folks want to start departmentally, and that's a good process for prototyping, but it's important to go back as well and make sure you're standardizing, scaling, and securing that data to make sure it's secure.
And this is not just to you, but to anybody. Do you need a data warehouse? Do you need to be in the cloud? Do you need, what tech do you need, from a big picture perspective,
Yeah, for scale and security, it's really nice to have those central components. And so, like I said, you can start departmental.
Same for you?
Yeah, completely agree with Tony. But again, we don't have to start knowing that we have to have all of that stuff implemented before we can even take value from that, right? So, we can start small, implement some of those things, and be able to build off of that as we progress and grow. Start with what's going to give the most value to the most amount of people, iterate, and then keep going. But
all right, we've just got did you have something to add, Abram? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, there's a slight difference for us in logistics sometimes is that the changes of technologies are happening quickly enough that when you go to get some of these sources, we'll find that we're the first person ever to have done it or attempted it at the company. So there isn't a data warehouse available. Like, we can't get that, and we don't. And if you can't, we're not able to maintain the speed of the project and also get that data backfilled into a warehouse. So typically our time to value demands that we go there and go to this obscure source, start hitting that API, get that data, and then once assuming everything is stable, deliver and move on to what's next.
It's a little bit of a non-traditional answer. It's a little bit unexpected.
Yeah.
I can really understand why that's the case. So we've got an interesting question from one of our from one of our attendees here. So and I'm going to actually see if our Chief Marketing Officer Tracy might want to comment. Josh may have a comment on it too, but the question is about customer digital experience and analytics around that. And I tend to think that means, and if the person wants to clarify, they can if we don't cover it. But the digital experience, the experience that somebody may have in working with you online, your website, social media, the experience that they have. And if that's not the angle, and you ask a clarifying question, but I'll see if Tracy Tracy has some thoughts on that, and maybe Josh as well. It'd be interesting. Let Tracy chime in, since she does that for us.
Sure. So I think by that question, just commenting on customers' digital experience and how do you measure that stuff. I think the big thing with COVID right now is that people are doing everything online, and those online experiences are going to continue, right? That's not going to go away. And I think a big thing too is that customers are expecting that those experiences are personalized to them. That's a big thing right now with marketing analytics. So, I think that as a marketer, I would answer this question more from a marketer side, but you need to really understand kind of what messages are resonating with your audience, what's converting, what people are searching for, to really customize that digital experience to make it more positive for your customers. So, I mean, to do that, you need to look at your if you have a marketing automation system. So we use Marketo. So looking at Marketo data, looking at Google Analytics data, looking at SEO data, your CRM, social media. So kind of looking at all those different data points. So I really do think the big one, and what we do too, is looking at what really is converting online, what's working, and really focusing on those messages, that content, those pages that people are on. So I think that hopefully that answers that question.
I appreciate that, because I know we talk about that all the time internally, and it's neat to be able to relate that to what some of our some other organizations may be interested in.
And just to add to that too, right? So being able to analyze all that stuff is great, but then I guess the real question then is, what does that experience and how does that equate to interaction and sales, right? So combining that stuff, pulling that in, and integrating it again in a meaningful way. I've had a couple clients, customers of mine, where we've integrated some of that data together. Sometimes it's harder to attribute an exact click or an exact whatever to a particular sale, but you can at least get to within a level of confidence that this particular campaign or this particular blog post is what drove this particular thing. But that all provides context.
So like this webinar is going to drive a huge amount of sales. Is that what you're saying? We need to take a look at that?
Right, but you might not be able to attribute, an attendee, it's a good example, right? But you can surmise, insights from seeing that, X happened, which caused an X increase in, visits to a site or clicks or whatever the case may be. And again, you might not be able to attribute an exact click or an exact email being open to an exact sale per se. But a lot of that stuff is leading indicators and what you can use to analyze to figure out what's effective and not effective.
So what you're saying is you can see some correlations between some of your activities, and maybe you can't necessarily attribute a cause, but you can attribute some things that happen around the same time. What are some of the new opportunities that are out there? So let me start with Tony. What are some of the new opportunities? Actually, you know what? I think you started with Tony last time. Let me start with Abram. What are some of the new opportunities? Just keep you guys on your toes. What are some of the new opportunities that you're seeing in supply chain? With businesses that are changing. When there's lots of change, lots of uncertainty, there's lots of opportunities. So what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing, and how do analytics fit in with that?
So a lot of it is just diagnostic to that key forecast being missing bit. Throw your modeling out the window. But since you can't predict any of that, you have to try to build a routine. So one thing that we've had a lot of success with is identifying a use case that you can help with data. So there's some kind of blind spot. It's possible to get the correct data to address it and flesh out that process with routine using thresholds in the data. Ideally in a way that's scalable to the organization. If you have a bunch of warehouse sites, you want to be able to build something that's applicable and distributable to your entire audience, and then design the analytics to support that very specific line of inquiry. So in supply chain, we're finding that kind of our best work is centered around operationalizing your data in a way that's reactive rather than proactive, and is providing people the immediate steps that they need to accomplish the tasks that they're doing in their day to help the company. And this is how you operationalize that data.
Tony, tell us some of the opportunities that you're seeing around people.
Sure. The biggest one that I see in terms of an opportunity that's going to help recover from the recession, again, from a people analytics perspective, your people are your most valuable asset as a company for majority of companies. And because of the crisis, a lot of talent has been injected into the workforce that historically hasn't been available in the same way. So it's really important that that teams that are helping support the business with data make sure that those recruiters that are working on those job recs that are open still are doing their due diligence to open those searches up beyond just the local office locations that you're used to recruiting in, and having a wider view potentially of candidate pool than what you've had historically, and opening yourselves up to more talent in different places that maybe would be unconventional, right? But what's critical in that, as you move more towards a remote workforce, is making sure that from an HR perspective, you're measuring the effectiveness of your onboarding processes. So if you're looking at it down even at a job role level, understanding what does the time to full productivity look like for a particular job role, and how do you shorten that window? And what's really important is looking at the data historically to understand what it's taken when you've been able to be face-to-face and in person for training and for enablement and all that stuff for onboarding. And now as you're moving more online, trying to identify opportunities to be creative in that, to shrink that window down, because potentially you're going to have big effects, not just on productivity, but also on culture, right? And employee engagement. So taking a data-driven approach to that and understanding you're not going to be able to get all the information necessarily to make a decision, but you can gather a lot of context to have a better idea of what's working and what's not, and have certain people learn from other people and what they're doing to be creative to bring people on board. And that's a huge opportunity in terms of injecting a bunch of talent into your organization and making sure that they're productive and that they're happy within your organization.
There's like also opportunities to make progress with any diversity and inclusion programs that companies may have as well.
Yeah, a lot of times companies are looking at performance of employees and looking at those, like, you know, if you recruit right out of colleges, right, they're looking at, you know, what schools are our target schools for recruiting. And certainly this is a great opportunity as well to expand your perspectives on that potentially, and look at historically Black colleges and finding alternative ways to get people in the organization that you might have been excluding before, right? And it's important to look at the data and be honest with yourself about whether or not candidates are making it through the pipeline that are diverse, not just from a racial or ethnic perspective, but also from a disability perspective, from getting veterans into your organization, and making sure that genders are well represented as well within your organization. And again, that comes from looking at the data and being honest with yourself and seeing if there's a big discrepancy, talking through that and understanding whether or not something needs to be done to fix that problem systemically, right? And some organizations have to do mandatory reporting for that, so they already know what's going on for that. But the more you can automate that, the more you can spend time on coming up with creative solutions and measuring the effectiveness of the programs that you are developing.
Great. I think there's really, really interesting opportunities, Tony. What about on the customer side? What are some of the opportunities you're seeing, Josh?
Yeah, so I think across the board, you know, whether you're struggling as an organization or you're really thriving as an organization, you know, taking time to figure out what your customers are, you know, segmenting them into groups, figuring out if old or new segmentations are needed, or if they still hold any sort of truth or weight to them.
That's a data science application, right? Segmentation is a data science generally, or not necessarily?
Generally speaking, yeah. But I mean, you can at a high level start to segment customers out, you know, even just by geographic location, or you know, some of the more higher level attributes of a customer as well. The data science aspect of it will allow you to get more insightful into the data and allow you to make some connections that just probably wouldn't be possible just by having a you know, Excel spreadsheet in front of you. But you know, taking that time to look at some of that stuff to see if what you have historically been doing is making sense, or if they are going to hold true, or if they're going to continue to hold true, given that everything's kind of changing at a very rapid pace as well right now. A lot of businesses are simply just reinventing themselves, right? So you have Starbucks, who's completely shifted from having you know, a lot of brick and mortar stores with cafe type things in them to now they're just basically just to-go orders, right? You know, the difference there is they have the data to support that decision. They have the ability to quickly see, okay, maybe this isn't working, or this really is working. We can continue to kind of move forward with that. So being able to do ideas, business ideas, and you know, if they are going to fail, have them fail very quickly and not be throwing good money after bad just because you don't have the data to necessarily support whether or not it was a success or not. But then also taking time to focus again on your customers to figure out, you know, historically, have we been meeting your needs? Have those needs changed? You know, so doing that sentiment analysis, sending out those surveys to kind of figure out, you know, is there a better path forward? Should we continue to do curbside? Should we can it? Should we only do curbside? You know, the possibilities are endless with that, but you know, there's a lot of opportunity there and a lot of data to support the decisions for those.
Yeah. So we're coming in on just a few minutes more. So I'd like to start kind of summarizing here. So I've heard a few things, some themes, some things. You know, got to make decisions on a shorter time frame. something that we've talked about. We talked about some new opportunities. We talked about companies probably have much of the data they need already. Talked about you can't use historical data in the same way, and forecasting and models need to be completely reevaluated. So I think there's a few, kind of, bigger takeaways. So take a look at how you do customer supply chain employee analytics, and think about the priorities of your organization and how you can use data to address the challenges prompted by COVID and the recession. And get a real data infrastructure in place, a modern one that's flexible and can support the kinds of analysis you're likely to do. Abram's suggestion aside that you can some time frames you need to move a little bit quicker, but you still need to really understand what's going on and make those decisions thoughtfully, and not just because you didn't have time to make a choice. And it's also probably a good time to, not probably, it's definitely a time to revisit your data strategy or undertake a data strategy initiative for the first time if you've never done one. So we're happy to talk to any of the attendees individually, help you flesh out some of your priorities. One of the things we're offering a one-day recovery analytics session. It's a specific engagement. It's kind of got 3 steps to it. There's some pre-workshop prep work, and we'll talk to you about making sure that we're ready for the day, so make the most use of time. A one day with a focused team from Analytics 8, not just one person. And of course, we're going to do these virtually. And then once we've gone through this session, we'll take that information back to discussion. We'll put together a detailed document and a custom plan for you post COVID. You can take that away. It's a relatively low commitment sort of thing, but it's something that we want to offer to those on the webinar and anybody else that hears about it as well. If you're interested, let us know. You can let us know on our website. You can reply to any of the emails that Tracy has sent you. Those are monitored by her and our marketing team. Send a message via LinkedIn to any of us. And with that, unless there's any final questions, I guess maybe Tracy, Tracy can wrap us up here.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks so much, Dave, Tony, Josh, and Abram for a great discussion today, and thank you to everyone who attended and joined us today. So I just want to end with a couple closing remarks. So we obviously really only scratched the surface today on this content. We do have a lot more content available on our website. We actually have a whole page dedicated to recovery analytics. We have blogs that dig deeper into some of these topics. So I will send everyone on this webinar a follow-up email that has a link to this webpage. And we also did record this session today in case you want to listen to it again or share it with someone else. So like Dave said, you'll have my contact information. You've gotten all my emails I sent this far, and I am a real person. I look at those emails and I can direct you to the best person to help you out if you have any questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our session. Thanks again for attending, and hope that you all have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh, Tony, Abram. Appreciate it.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Get easy.